In the heart of a bustling capital city, where cobblestone streets met towering spires and golden gates shimmered under the sun, two royal guards stood tall outside the grand palace entrance. Their names were Captain Elias and his junior partner, Finn. Both men wore ornate uniforms that sparkled with precision, their breastplates polished to a mirror-like shine. To the people passing by, they appeared more like statues than humans, silent, unmovable, and utterly stoic. Tourists often gathered around them, cameras clicking away as they tried to capture the perfect shot. Some even went so far as to wave their hands in front of the guards' faces or make silly faces, hoping for a reaction. But Elias and Finn had been trained not to flinch, not to blink, not to show any sign of emotion. It was their duty to remain unwavering, no matter what happened around them. For years, this rigid discipline defined their lives. But behind those blank expressions lay stories untold. Captain Elias, a man in his late 30s with sharp features and piercing blue eyes, carried burdens heavier than his ceremonial sword. Months ago, he had lost his younger sister to illness, a loss that left an ache in his chest he could never quite shake off. Yet every morning, he strapped on his armor and reported for duty, burying his grief beneath layers of professionalism. His role as a protector of the kingdom gave him purpose, but it also demanded he lock away his emotions. Finn, on the other hand, was much younger, just 22, and still finding his footing in the world of royal guards. With freckles dotting his cheeks and a mop of unruly brown hair hidden beneath his helmet, he looked more like a boy playing dress-up than a seasoned sentinel. Doubts plagued him daily. Was he strong enough? Brave enough? Could he really live up to the expectations placed upon him? Despite these insecurities, he admired Elias deeply and clung to the older man's guidance like a lifeline. The bond between the two guards was unspoken yet undeniable. They communicated through subtle nods, shared glances, and occasional whispered words during brief breaks. This camaraderie helped them endure long hours standing at attention, rain or shine. On particularly quiet days, when the only sounds were distant chatter and the rustling leaves of nearby trees, Finn sometimes wondered what it would feel like to let go, to laugh, to cry, to simply be human again. But such thoughts were fleeting, quickly pushed aside as another group of tourists approached, pointing and giggling at their stoic forms. One spring afternoon, however, everything changed. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of blooming flowers. Crowds milled about as usual, snapping photos and admiring the palace's majestic architecture. Among them was a little girl named Lily, whose bright red coat stood out like a beacon against the gray stone walls. She wandered close to the guards, her tiny hand clutching a stuffed rabbit. Her wide, curious eyes scanned the towering figures before her, and without hesitation, she stepped forward. "Are you real?" she asked, her voice soft, but filled with wonder. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, something extraordinary occurred, something neither Elias nor Finn could have predicted. A crack appeared in the impenetrable facade they had built over years of service. What followed would remind them both that beneath the armor, they were still human after all. The little girl's question hung in the air like a melody, simple yet profound. "Are you real?" she repeated, her voice tinged with curiosity and a hint of disbelief. Her bright blue eyes sparkled as she tilted her head, studying the towering figures before her. Captain Elias felt an unfamiliar tug at his heart. For a moment, he forgot about the weight of his armor. The rules drilled into him, and even the grief that had shadowed him for months. All he could focus on was this tiny girl, whose innocence seemed to pierce through years of practiced stoicism. Finn shifted slightly behind him, his fingers tightening around the hilt of his ceremonial sword. He glanced at Elias, unsure how to handle the situation. Protocol dictated they remain silent and motionless, no matter what, but something about Lily's presence made it hard to ignore her. She wasn't just another curious tourist. There was a sincerity in her gaze that felt impossible to resist. Before Finn could process what was happening, Lily reached out and gently tugged on Elias's belt. The unexpected touch startled both guards, but it was Elias who reacted first. Slowly, deliberately, he knelt down until he was eye level with the little girl. His movements were careful, almost reverent, as if afraid to break the spell of the moment. "I'm very real," he said softly, his deep voice carrying a warmth none of the bystanders had ever heard from him before. "And who might you be?" Lily's face lit up with delight. "I'm Lily," she exclaimed, holding up her stuffed rabbit for inspection. "This is Mr. Bunnington. He helps me be brave." Elias couldn't help but smile, a small tentative curve of his lips that felt foreign yet strangely comforting. "Well, Mr. Bunnington must be very important then," he replied, nodding solemnly. "Being brave is a big job." Encouraged by his response, Lily stepped closer, her red coat brushing against his polished boots. "Do you have to wear all that shiny stuff every day?" she asked, pointing at his breastplate. "Doesn't it get heavy?" Elias hesitated, glancing briefly at Finn, who stood frozen in place. This was uncharted territory. Guards weren't supposed to engage in casual conversations, let alone discuss the practicalities of their uniforms. Yet here he was, kneeling on the ground, chatting with a child while dozens of people looked on. Somehow, none of that mattered right now. "It does get heavy," Elias admitted, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "But it's part of the job. Keeps us safe while we protect everyone else." Lily nodded thoughtfully, as though considering the importance of such a responsibility. Then, without warning, she grinned mischievously. "Can I sit on your guardrail? Just for a second. I promise I won't fall." Elias froze, suddenly aware of the eyes watching them. Tourists whispered excitedly, some snapping photos, others laughing quietly at the unexpected interaction. Even Finn seemed torn between amusement and panic. Breaking protocol was one thing. Allowing a civilian, let alone a child, to interact so freely with royal guards was practically unheard of. But when Elias looked back at Lily, he saw not just a curious little girl, but a reflection of his late sister. She had been around the same age when she used to pepper him with endless questions, her laughter filling their home with light. The memory brought a lump to his throat, and for the first time in months, it didn't feel suffocating. Instead, it felt healing. "All right," he said finally, his tone gentle but firm. "But only for a moment. And you'll need someone to spot you." He glanced up at Finn, silently asking for help. Finn hesitated, then moved forward, positioning himself near the rail. "I've got her," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the growing murmur of the crowd. As Lily climbed onto the guardrail, giggling with excitement, Finn found himself smiling too. There was something magical about the way her joy seemed to ripple outward, touching everyone around her, including two guards who had spent years hiding their humanity behind impenetrable masks. For the first time in what felt like forever, Elias and Finn weren't just symbols of authority or discipline. They were simply two men sharing a heartfelt moment with a child who reminded them of the beauty in connection and the power of breaking character, even if just for a little while. As Lily perched on the guardrail, her laughter ringing out like music, the crowd around them grew larger and more animated. People stopped in their tracks, some smiling warmly, others snapping photos with their phones. The scene was unlike anything anyone had ever witnessed at the palace gates. Two stoic royal guards, known for their unwavering discipline, were now crouched beside a little girl, sharing a moment of pure joy. Finn kept one hand lightly hovering near Lily to ensure she didn't lose her balance, though it was clear she was having the time of her life. Her red coat swayed as she swung her legs back and forth, chatting away about her favorite things, school, painting, and how Mr. Bunnington, the stuffed rabbit, was an expert at keeping secrets. Elias listened intently, nodding along as if every word she said carried profound wisdom. For once, the weight of his armor felt less oppressive. Instead, it seemed to anchor him to this beautiful, fleeting moment. "You're really good at being a guard," Lily declared suddenly, turning to Finn with wide eyes. "But do you ever get scared?" Finn blinked, caught off guard by the question. He glanced at Elias, who gave him an encouraging look, then knelt down so he could meet Lily's gaze. Sometimes, he admitted softly, surprising even himself with his honesty. But that's okay because I have my partner here to help me when I feel unsure. Lily nodded solemnly, as if this made perfect sense. Then, with the confidence only a child could muster, she leaned forward and whispered loudly, "I think you're both very brave. Even braver than knights." The comment drew chuckles from the onlookers, but for Finn, it meant something deeper. In that instant, he realized that bravery wasn't just about standing tall or following orders. It was also about showing kindness, embracing vulnerability, and connecting with others. And right now, he and Elias were doing exactly that. Just as Lily hopped down from the rail, content with her brief adventure, a murmur rippled through the crowd. A figure emerged from the palace steps, catching everyone's attention, including the guards. It was Queen Seraphina herself, descending gracefully toward the gate. Her presence commanded respect, yet there was a softness in her expression as she observed the unusual interaction before her. Elias and Finn immediately straightened up, resuming their formal stances despite the lingering warmth of the moment. They exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether they'd crossed a line by breaking protocol so openly. Surely, the Queen would reprimand them for stepping out of character in front of the public. But to their surprise, Seraphina didn't approach with disapproval. Instead, her lips curved into a gentle smile as she stopped near Lily. "And what is your name, young lady?" the Queen asked kindly, bending slightly to address the child. "I'm Lily," she announced proudly, clutching Mr. Bunnington close. "These guards are super nice. They let me sit on the rail, and they told me all about being brave." Seraphina chuckled softly, her gaze shifting between Elias and Finn. She studied them for a moment, noting the faint traces of emotion still lingering on their faces. "It seems you've made quite an impression on our sentinels today," she said to Lily. Turning to the guards, she added, "And it appears they've returned the favor." Elias cleared his throat, struggling to find the right words. "Your Majesty, we—" "There's no need for explanation," Seraphina interrupted gently, raising a hand. "Moments like these remind us why we serve, not just to uphold tradition, but to inspire trust and connection. You've done well today." Her words hung in the air, wrapping around Elias and Finn like a comforting embrace. For years, they had believed their worth lay solely in their ability to remain unyielding and detached. Now they understood that true strength came from moments like this, when humanity shone through the cracks of duty. Lily beamed at the Queen, completely unaware of the significance of the exchange. Before leaving, she promised to write letters to her new friends, her voice filled with excitement. As she skipped back to her mother, the crowd began to disperse, buzzing with stories of the heartwarming encounter. For Elias and Finn, however, the impact ran deeper. What started as a simple question from a curious child had blossomed into something transformative. A reminder that even the most rigid roles could bend, just enough to let compassion shine through. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, Elias and Finn found themselves standing in a quiet chamber within the palace barracks. The room was dimly lit by a single lantern hanging from the ceiling, casting long shadows across the wooden table where their commanding officers sat with a stern expression. Normally, such a setting would have filled them with dread, but tonight, something felt different. The commander cleared his throat, shuffling through a stack of papers. "You two are aware why you're here," he began, his tone firm but not unkind. "There have been reports about your conduct today. Reports that suggest you deviated significantly from protocol." Finn's heart sank. He had known this moment would come, yet hearing it aloud made the reality sink in. His hands clenched into fists beneath the table as he braced himself for the reprimand. Beside him, Elias remained composed, though his jaw tightened ever so slightly. Neither man spoke. They simply waited for the verdict. But before the commander could continue, the door creaked open. Everyone turned to see Queen Seraphina entering the room, her presence commanding immediate attention. She carried herself with grace, her regal gown flowing behind her like a whisper of silk. Her eyes softened as they landed on Elias and Finn, and she nodded toward the commander. "May I speak with them?" she asked politely, though it was clear her request was more of a directive. The commander hesitated for only a moment before bowing deeply and excusing himself, leaving the three of them alone. Once the door closed, Seraphina took a seat at the head of the table, folding her hands neatly in front of her. For a while, she said nothing, simply studying the guards with an unreadable expression. Finally, she broke the silence. "I've spent most of my life surrounded by people who follow rules without question," she began, her voice calm yet deliberate. "And while discipline is essential, there comes a time when we must ask ourselves, what is the purpose of these rules? Why do we serve?" Elias shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to respond. It wasn't every day the Queen addressed them directly, let alone posed such philosophical questions. Finn, however, found himself leaning forward slightly, drawn in by her words. "You see," Seraphina continued, "the crown exists not just to rule but to protect, to nurture trust between the monarchy and its people. Today, you reminded me of that truth. That little girl, Lily, saw you not as distant figures of authority, but as kind, approachable humans. And in doing so, you strengthened the bond between the palace and those it serves." Her gaze lingered on Elias, who felt a lump rise in his throat. He thought back to the way Lily had looked at him, with curiosity, admiration, and trust. It was a look he hadn't seen since his sister passed away, and it stirred emotions he buried deep inside. "And you," she said, turning to Finn, "showed courage in stepping outside your comfort zone. Not many young guards would risk breaking protocol to ensure a child's safety and happiness, but you did, and that speaks volumes about your character." Finn swallowed hard, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. For so long, he had doubted whether he belonged in this role, whether he was strong enough to live up to the expectations placed upon him. Yet here was the Queen herself, praising him for qualities he hadn't even realized he possessed. Seraphina leaned back in her chair, her expression softening further. "I won't deny that what you did today was unconventional, but sometimes moments of compassion outweigh the need for rigid adherence to tradition. You reminded everyone watching, not just the crowd but also yourselves, that behind the armor you are still human. And that humanity is what makes our kingdom strong." When she finished speaking, the room fell silent once more. Elias and Finn exchanged glances, both struggling to process the weight of her words. They had expected punishment, perhaps even dismissal, yet instead they were met with understanding and praise. As Seraphina rose to leave, she paused at the doorway and turned back to them. "Remember this day," she said softly. "Let it guide you in your service, because true leadership isn't about enforcing rules. It's about inspiring others." With that, she exited, leaving Elias and Finn alone in the quiet chamber. Neither man spoke for several minutes, each lost in their thoughts. When they finally stood to leave, they shared a small, knowing smile, a silent acknowledgement that something profound had shifted within them. From that night on, they vowed to carry the lesson of Lily's visit with them always, that even the smallest acts of kindness could leave the biggest impact. Later that night, after the lanterns in the barracks had been dimmed and the halls grew quiet, Elias and Finn sat across from each other at a small wooden table. The room was bathed in the soft glow of a single candle, its flickering light casting dancing shadows on the walls. Both men were still processing the events of the day. The unexpected encounter with Lily, the Queen's surprising intervention, and the realization that their actions had resonated far beyond what they could have imagined. Elias leaned back in his chair, his hands clasped loosely over his stomach. His mind kept drifting to the little girl who had tugged at his belt and asked if he was real. She had reminded him so much of his sister. the same wide-eyed curiosity, the same unguarded laughter. For years, he had buried those memories, locking them away behind the stoic mask he wore daily. But today, Lily had cracked that mask open, letting a sliver of light seep through. It wasn't just her presence that moved him. It was the way she saw him, not as a symbol of authority, but as a person. Someone capable of kindness, humor, and connection. Finn, meanwhile, stared at the flame of the candle, lost in thought. He had always doubted himself, questioning whether he was cut out for this life of discipline and duty. Yet, when Lily had asked if he ever got scared, something inside him shifted. Admitting his fears aloud, to a child, no less, had felt strangely liberating. And then there was the Queen's praise. Her words echoed in his mind. You showed courage in stepping outside your comfort zone. Courage, a word he never associated with himself until now. You know, Elias said suddenly, breaking the silence. I think I needed that today. Finn looked up, startled by the rare vulnerability in his partner's voice. What do you mean? Elias hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Losing my sister, it left a hole I didn't know how to fill. Every day, I put on this uniform and stand guard because it gives me purpose. But sometimes, it feels like I'm hiding behind it too. Today, though, he paused, glancing at Finn. Today, I felt human again. Like I wasn't just a statue standing at the palace gates. Finn nodded slowly, understanding exactly what Elias meant. I felt it too, he admitted. All this time, I've been so worried about messing up or not being good enough. But Lily didn't care about any of that. She just wanted to talk, to laugh, to share her world with us. And honestly, it made me feel like maybe I am good enough. The two men fell silent again, the weight of their reflections settling between them. After a moment, Finn reached into his pocket and pulled out a piece of parchment and a pen. Do you think she'll really write? He asked, referring to Lily's promise to send letters. Elias smiled faintly. If anyone can keep a promise, it's her. That kid has more determination in her pinky finger than most people have in their whole bodies. Encouraged by the idea, Finn began writing a letter to his own family. He poured his heart onto the page, describing the day's events in vivid detail. He wrote about Lily's bright red coat, her stuffed rabbit named Mr. Bunnington, and the way she had fearlessly approached two towering guards. He confessed how nervous he had been to break protocol, but also how rewarding it felt to make someone smile. By the time he signed his name at the bottom, he realized he hadn't written home like this in months. Sharing the story somehow made the burden of self-doubt feel lighter. As the candle burned lower, Elias rose from his seat and walked to the window. Outside, the city was quiet, its streets empty save for the occasional flicker of lamplight. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel weighed down by grief or regret. Instead, he felt a spark of hope, a reminder that even the smallest moments of connection could leave a lasting impact. Turning back to Finn, he said, "We broke character today, but maybe that's okay. Maybe breaking character doesn't make us weak. Maybe it makes us stronger." Finn nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Yeah," he agreed. "Maybe it does." And with that, the two guards prepared for bed, carrying with them the memory of a little girl who had unknowingly changed their lives. As they drifted off to sleep, neither man realized how profoundly that one afternoon would shape their futures, or how the bonds they formed that day would ripple outward, touching countless others in ways they couldn't yet imagine. True to her word, Lily didn't let much time pass before she sent her first letter. It arrived at the palace gates just a week later, tucked inside a bright yellow envelope decorated with colorful stickers of stars and flowers. The guards on duty that morning couldn't help but chuckle as they handed it over to Captain Elias and Finn, who were standing at their usual posts. Elias carefully opened the envelope, his lips twitching into a small smile as he unfolded the paper inside. The letter was written in crayon, its large, uneven letters wobbling across the page like a child's clumsy footsteps. "Dear Mr. Brave Guards," it began, "I hope you are doing good. I miss talking to you. Did you know I drew a picture of you? You look very shiny and strong." Attached to the letter was a vibrant drawing. In it, two towering figures stood proudly beside a red-coated girl holding a stuffed rabbit. The guard's armor gleamed exaggeratedly, almost cartoonish, while Lily's smile stretched wide across her face. Above them, she had drawn a big yellow sun with rays beaming down, along with the words "Best Friends" scrawled in bold letters. Finn laughed softly as he examined the artwork. "She thinks we're best friends now," he said, shaking his head in disbelief. "What do we even say back?" Elias grinned, already reaching for a pen. "We tell her thank you, and maybe ask how Mr. Bunnington is doing." Over the weeks that followed, Lily's letters became a cherished part of their routine. Each envelope brought new stories about her life. How she aced a spelling test, painted a picture of the palace for art class, or convinced her mom to bake cookies, just like the ones brave guards probably eat. Her imagination knew no bounds, and her enthusiasm spilled onto every page. In return, Elias and Finn took turns crafting thoughtful responses. They described their days at the palace, shared funny anecdotes about tourists trying to distract them, and even included sketches of their own, though none quite matched the charm of Lily's masterpieces. Slowly but surely, their exchanges deepened, creating a bond that transcended age, rank, and circumstance. The letters also served another purpose. They reminded the guards why they served. On particularly long or monotonous shifts, reading one of Lily's updates could instantly lift their spirits. Her innocent observations about bravery, kindness, and making people smile inspired them to carry those values into their daily interactions. More than once, they found themselves going out of their way to assist visitors or offer a reassuring word to someone struggling outside the palace gates. Word of their correspondence eventually spread among the other guards, sparking curiosity and admiration. Some teased Elias and Finn playfully, calling them pen pals extraordinaire, while others expressed genuine interest in the impact such simple gestures could have. One older guard admitted he wished he'd taken more opportunities to connect with civilians during his career, vowing to follow their example moving forward. Even Queen Seraphina heard about the ongoing exchange. During one of her rare visits to the barracks, she asked to see some of Lily's letters. As she flipped through the colorful pages, her expression softened. "This is what leadership looks like," she remarked. "Not power or authority, but connection. You've shown everyone here that being the guardian isn't just about protecting walls. It's about nurturing relationships." By the time months had passed, Elias and Finn realized they weren't just corresponding with a little girl. They were building a legacy. Through Lily's eyes, they saw the ripple effect of compassion and humanity. Every note they exchanged reinforced the idea that even the smallest acts of kindness, like writing a letter or kneeling to chat with a child, could leave an indelible mark on someone's heart. And though neither man knew it yet, this bond would soon lead to something far greater, an invitation that would bring their story full circle and remind the entire kingdom of the power of heartfelt moments. Months later, as autumn painted the city in shades of amber and gold, an unexpected invitation arrived at the palace gates. It came in the form of a formal scroll sealed with the royal crest, delivered by one of the Queen's personal messengers. When Elias and Finn unrolled the parchment, their eyes widened in disbelief. They had been invited to attend a special ceremony honoring acts of compassion within the community. And not only that, but Lily and her family were also named as honored guests. The news spread quickly among the guards, sparking whispers of excitement and pride. For years, ceremonies like this had celebrated grand gestures, soldiers returning from battle, philanthropists donating fortunes, or leaders spearheading large-scale reforms. Never before had something as simple as breaking character to connect with a child earned such recognition. Yet here they were, singled out for moments that had felt so natural, so human at the time. On the day of the event, the palace courtyard was transformed into a breathtaking scene. Strings of twinkling lights hung overhead, casting a warm glow over rows of elegantly dressed attendees. The air buzzed with anticipation as nobles, commoners, and even foreign dignitaries gathered to witness the occasion. At the center of it all stood Queen Seraphina, resplendent in her ceremonial robes, ready to address the crowd. When Elias and Finn entered the courtyard alongside Lily and her parents, the applause that erupted was thunderous. Lily, now wearing a pretty blue dress instead of her signature red coat, clutched Mr. Bunnington tightly as she waved shyly at the crowd. Her mother gave both guards a grateful smile, while her father shook their hands firmly, thanking them for making such a lasting impression on his daughter. As they took their seats near the stage, Finn leaned over to whisper to Elias, "Do you think anyone else realizes we almost got in trouble for this?" Elias chuckled softly. "Let's just say I'm glad the Queen likes us." When it was their turn to be recognized, Queen Seraphina stepped forward, her voice carrying across the courtyard. "Today, we honor two individuals who remind us that true strength lies not in rigid discipline, but in the courage to show kindness," she began, her gaze sweeping over the audience before settling on Elias and Finn. "These men serve our kingdom with unwavering dedication, yet they showed us that compassion is just as vital as duty. Through their actions, they inspired trust, joy, and hope, not just in one little girl, but in everyone who witnessed their humanity." The crowd erupted into cheers once more as Elias and Finn rose from their seats, bowing deeply to the Queen. Lily, unable to contain her excitement, jumped up and hugged both guards tightly, much to everyone's delight. Cameras flashed, capturing the heartwarming moment for posterity. Afterward, during a private gathering in the palace gardens, Lily proudly introduced Elias and Finn to her extended family, calling them her best friends without hesitation. Her enthusiasm was infectious, drawing smiles from everyone around them. Even some of the more reserved nobles couldn't resist joining in the conversation, eager to hear about the now famous encounter at the palace gates. As the evening drew to a close, Queen Seraphina approached the group one last time. She knelt down to speak directly to Lily, her expression warm and sincere. "You've taught us all a valuable lesson, young lady," she said gently. "That bravery isn't always about fighting battles. It's also about opening your heart to others." Turning to Elias and Finn, she added, "And sometimes, it takes a child to remind us how to do that." Walking home that night, Elias and Finn felt a profound sense of fulfillment. What had started as a brief, spontaneous connection with a curious little girl had grown into something far greater, a testament to the power of empathy and authenticity. And as they glanced back at the glowing palace, they knew their story would continue to inspire long after the ceremony ended. For in the hearts of those who witnessed it, and in the memories of all who heard it, the legacy of Lily, Elias, and Finn would live on as proof that even the smallest acts of humanity could change the world. Years passed, and though life moved forward for Elias and Finn, the memory of Lily remained etched in their hearts like a cherished melody. Captain Elias eventually retired from his post, his hair streaked with silver and his once pristine armor stored away as a relic of decades spent in service. Yet he often found himself revisiting the lessons he had learned that spring afternoon outside the palace gates. The little girl who asked if he was real had taught him something invaluable, that humanity wasn't something to hide beneath layers of discipline, but rather a gift to share with the world. Finn, now a seasoned guard and mentor to younger recruits, carried those same lessons into his leadership. He became known not just for his sharp eye and steady hand, but also for his ability to connect with people. During training sessions, he encouraged new guards to embrace moments of vulnerability, reminding them that compassion didn't weaken their authority, it strengthened it. Sometimes breaking character isn't just allowed, he would say with a smile, it's necessary. Lily grew up too, her childhood dreams of becoming a painter blossoming into reality. By her teenage years, she was already gaining recognition for her vibrant artwork, which often featured themes of kindness, courage, and connection. One painting, titled The Shining Guards, depicted two towering figures standing beside a young girl holding a stuffed rabbit. It won first prize at a prestigious art competition, earning her widespread acclaim. When interviewed about the piece, Lily always credited Elias and Finn for inspiring her. "They showed me that even the strongest people can be gentle," she would say, her voice filled with gratitude. Decades later, when the palace underwent renovations, a decision was made to commemorate acts of compassion within its walls. A statue was commissioned, a bronze sculpture capturing the iconic moment when Lily sat on the guardrail between Elias and Finn. The artist worked closely with photographs and descriptions provided by witnesses, ensuring every detail was perfect. From Elias's slight smile to Finn's protective stance and Lily's joyful grin, the finished piece radiated warmth and humanity. On the day of its unveiling, crowds gathered once again in the palace courtyard. Now older, Lily stood beside her parents, tears glistening in her eyes as she watched the sheet fall away to reveal the statue. Nearby, an elderly Elias leaned on a cane, while Finn, his uniform still fitting snugly despite his age, beamed with pride. Queen Seraphina, who had long since stepped down from her throne, attended the ceremony as well, her presence a quiet reminder of how far-reaching that single moment had been. Engraved below the sculpture were words chosen by the royal council: "Compassion knows no rank." Visitors paused before the statue daily, some snapping photos, others simply standing quietly, reflecting on its meaning. Many wondered about the story behind it, prompting tour guides to recount the tale of a curious child and two steadfast guards whose brief interaction changed lives forever. For Elias and Finn, the statue served as both a tribute and a call to action. It reminded them, and everyone else, that true strength lies not in stoicism or power, but in the ability to touch hearts. Their bond with Lily may have begun with a simple question, but it evolved into a legacy that transcended generations. Even today, children visiting the palace are told the story of the guards who broke character. Some leave inspired to pursue careers in service. Others vow to approach life with more kindness. And every so often, someone places a small stuffed rabbit at the base of the statue, a nod to Mr. Bunnington, and the day a little girl reminded the world that bravery comes in many forms. In the end, the heartfelt moment shared between Lily, Elias, and Finn proved timeless. It wasn't just a story about guards stepping out of line or a child's innocent curiosity. It was a testament to the enduring power of connection. For in a world often divided by titles, ranks, and roles, they showed that humanity could bridge any gap, leaving behind ripples of love and understanding that stretched far beyond their lifetimes.